the Silver Spurs.
This event is so much fun. It's one of the best fundraisers and funnest fundraisers in Salt Lake City.
Hoedown, put on your best Western duds, go for it. So we can raise money for homeless youth and people who need help with addiction and mental illness. Hi, I'm Kathy Bray. I'm the President and CEO for Volunteers of America, Utah, and thank you so much for participating in Silver Spurs with us to help us raise important funds in these unprecedented times. During the coronavirus pandemic and also with the racial tensions and justice issues that have surfaced recently, Volunteers of America is really hard at work trying to help not only our staff and our clients not get the virus, but also helping people of color who work for us and who are served by us to feel welcome in the spaces that we provide. With the coronavirus, we have continued to keep our facilities open. We have a lot more cleaning going on and all of the precautions, mask wearing and so forth, and we've done an excellent job preventing the spread of the virus within our facilities. So on any given night, we have about 350 individuals who are living in our buildings, and we are doing our very best to keep them safe, and we really appreciate everybody's support for that, and we want to continue to provide that level of support and quality of service to everyone who comes to us. So then the question is, what can we do about it? And really there is an answer. You can join with us and we can work together to create a community-supported bridge, the one I talked about, where we provide that path for people who are struggling. Homeless youth, think about how difficult this time has been for them. Not only do they have nowhere to live to social isolate, but they're still losing jobs more often because of businesses that have closed down. It's really been very difficult. And for mothers who are addicted, who have little children, they're still coming to us, and now their circumstances are even more dire, and we're seeing more of them coming. People with mental health issues are very stressed, extra stressed by the isolation of the coronavirus and the need for them to separate even further from society, and it's been very devastating. So now more than ever, we need your help. Please join us. We are going to continue to be strong. We're going to provide quality services. We are committed to making sure that homeless people who have addictions or mental illnesses, low-income people, all the other people who have lost their jobs recently, have a place to land where they can get the kind of support that they need to change their lives around and become more self-reliant. So please join us. This is so important. Thank you so much for being part of the solution. We really can't do this without you. Please give generously. I know this is a difficult time, but please do what you can. We definitely need your support. And thank you for coming to the Hoedown for Hope.
Welcome, welcome guests to the Volunteers of America Silver Spurs barbecue event. Now, this is going to be a fun night because Brian and I, my son,
hello,
get together and do our favorite thing, which is cooking. This is going to give you some ideas about entertaining. In COVID, we can't do those great big parties anymore. So this is how you can create a dinner party for 8. Before we start grilling, I'm going to say that when you're grilling, you have to be able to do action. And you have to be working while your guests are here. So you want to make sure that you have things for your guests to do when they arrive. So we put together a watermelon mojito. Very slim on the alcohol because we have a lot of wine tonight and they have to drive, so we're being very conscientious about that. Charcuterie plate is always something great to do because it's so easy. Today I have 3 kinds of Utah cheeses, a white Stilton with apricot, and I have this English cheese. Just garnished with some grapes, some local Creminelli sausages. You know, it takes nothing to put this together. I mean, yes, I bought the ingredients, but from start to finish, I had 5 minutes into this. So not a lot of time consuming, but everyone loves the charcuterie. If If you don't know cheese, then go to a place like Harmon's or a place where there's a great cheesemonger that can explain things to you. But if you're afraid to ask, here's a tip. And I have washed my hands, they're impeccably clean, germless. But a lot of these great cheeses on here tonight are from our local Utah cheesemakers. This one's from Heber Valley. I have some here from Beehive. And I can tell you, you're going to love them all. None of them are stinky cheeses. They're all basically a white cheddar, and they're flavored differently. So you don't have to be too adventuresome to try a Beehive or a Heber Valley cheese. And I think my guests are going to love those tonight. So while we get started eating, I'm going to turn the time over to Ryan because he's here, the main attraction of why you're here tonight, which is grilling, not grilling 101, honey. If you were thinking this is 101, forget that. This is grilling 401 because he's my grill master. People who think they grill, Ryan puts them in their place.
All right. Grilling's my favorite thing in the world. It was one of the first jobs I ever worked in our family catering business that I actually enjoyed. So washing dishes, for 10 hours really sucks, and making 500 cheesecakes in a Saturday morning really sucks. But I was around 15 years old when I first got put on the grill, and that changed our family business for me. So it is a little, I've got a few advanced tips, to share tonight, but it is kind of, in some ways, it's a blend of 101 and 401, because we're going to do some of the staples that I do on my own patio at home more than anything else. So the first course tonight, we're going to start with a Steelhead Trout. And the Steelhead Trout, you may notice, both in the color and the size and the shape, looks a lot like a salmon. And it's very, very similar. I find the flavors a little lighter, more subtle, and I find that the steelhead just loves to go in the smoker. And I did want to showcase two different tools tonight, two different grills. This pellet cooker, so the ones from Camp Chef, the ones from Traeger, Green Mountain, those have kind of taken the backyard cooking scene by storm over the last few years, and they've really revolutionized backyard smoking. I have one at home. This is the one I brought from my home. We have several at work. They work really well. However, I will say, and this is not to disparage the marketing of any of these companies, they are not an all-in-one cooker. In fact, they are not a grill. So we're going to do the salmon in the pellet cooker, and it's going to be just perfect. But I also have some dry-aged New York Wagyu steak, and it really needs a sear far beyond anything that one of these pellet cookers can create. So we're going to do that on the classic Weber kettle, just the iconic little tripod thing. That grill is $99 at Home Depot, and it'll be the most versatile grill, and especially if you want to cook steak, you need something that can get roaring hot. So with this trout, one of the other things I want to showcase tonight is I want to showcase that when you start with the right ingredients, you can cook very, very simply. The fire itself can be one of your main ingredients and flavors. And so far on here, just a little oil, a little salt, a little pepper, that is it. I let this air out for about a day in the fridge so it's very, very dry on the surface, which will help it create a nice, we're just going to put that in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ramp that up to about 275, 300 degrees in the smoker for about 20 to 30 minutes. I'll just eyeball it. And then we'll come back, we'll glaze it with some honey, we'll maybe shingle some oranges across the top, lower the temperature down to 200 to 225, and we'll let it slowly finish. Very, very simple, very, very easy. You can eat that trout as is. You can add a salsa, you can put sauces on the top. You can pair it with almost any course. I think tonight's going to be our first course. We're going to pair it with a salad and a dry sparkling rosé. Going to be really, really nice that way. So while that's going, we will move on to the steak. So I have here some hardwood hickory charcoal. It's been getting hot in the chimney, and I'm just going to dump that out. Spread that out on my grill. What I'm going to do here on my charcoal grill, and if you have a gas grill, that works as well, but I will tell you that the benefit of charcoal is incredibly high temperatures, a real authentic wood flavor, and a long burn. Even the hottest gas grills cannot get as hot as a good hard-boiled or charcoal fire would get. And for steak, that's one of the really important things. But what I'm going to do, you can see, I'm putting all of my charcoal in a nice even bed over on 1/2 or 1/3 of the grill. And I'm leaving no charcoal on the other side of the grill. Because what I want to do is I want to create two really distinct temperature zones. I want one that's like roaring hot, 7, 8, 900, 1,000 degrees if I can. And then I want one that's very cold, maybe 200 degrees only. And especially when you're cooking larger cuts. And so people ask me, Ryan, I have trouble cooking a big, thick ribeye, or I bought these tomahawk steaks, but what do I do with them? And so we've got these New Yorks that are about 1.5 inches thick. And once you're at a steak that's that thick, or once you're at a cut that's, you know, over 16 ounces, and these I think are 18 ounces tonight. Once you've got a bigger cut, one of the most important things to do to be successful as you cook a bigger cut is you have to think about separating the cooking process into two very distinct stages. And the first stage is searing, and then the next stage is cooking. And when it comes to searing, it is impossible to be too hot. In fact, a couple summers ago, one of my chefs at work came out and be like, Ryan, I think the grill's too hot to cook this flank steak. And I was like, there's no such thing. I promise you there's no such thing. You can throw it, and the faster that you can sear and the hotter your grill can be, the better. And that's not, we're not going to cook it over the hot fire like that until it's done. We're going to sear it on the fire, and then we're going to separate. We're going to go to a different stage, and we're going to cook steak. So we're going to move it over to a low zone, and we're going to let it slowly come up. Because once you have a big piece of meat, you have so much thermal mass, and I like to think of it like a freight train. It takes a lot of energy to get it going. But once it's going, it takes a lot of time to slow that thing down. And so if you get your steak, especially a big steak, and you've gotten it going, it takes a lot of time to slow it down, and if you're not watching, you'll overdo it. And so that's why you have to separate the two processes. You have to go really slow with the cooking, slowly approaching your target temperature so you can slowly slow it down. And the interesting thing is you can change which one comes first and which one comes second. You can put it like on the slow zone of the fire or the grill, or if you've got a grill with like an adjustable grate, you can put it way up high and just let it slowly come up to temperature. And then once it's getting close, once you're maybe 15, 20 degrees away from what you want to eat at, then you drop it down into the hot zone and you sear it off nice and quick. You can also do it the other way around. You can sear it. You can take the raw steaks, put them right over the hot zone, sear it up nice and hot, and then move it to a slow zone and let it slowly come up to temperature. It really doesn't matter which direction you go as long as you keep those two things separate and you don't let that freight train just run away on you. The only reason perhaps to do sear and then cook as opposed to a reverse sear is if you have a particularly wet piece of meat. If your meat is really, really wet and has a lot of moisture on it, I do like to do a reverse sear. I put it on the low temperature zone and let it slowly come up and then finish over the hot fire. And that way the surface dries out a little bit before you go to sear it. Because if it has a lot of moisture, you put that over the hot fire, all that moisture has to evaporate off before you get any browning effect, before you develop any crusting or that searing. But if it's really dry, then you can jump straight to the sear. These are a dry aged steak, and I've got a nice dry rub on them. It's absorbed a lot of the moisture. I've had them sitting uncovered in the fridge all day. So I don't think these ones are going to need to dry out too much. So I think for these ones, we will go straight onto a sear, and we'll move them off and we'll slowly finish. The other thing I will say, and this is something that sometimes takes some people, and we may have to do this, but having a little digital thermometer around until you can get a feel for it really helps. And sometimes when you've got a big steak and you're trying to separate the cooking and the sear, you can even just take a break. If you've seared it and it's cooking too fast, just take the whole thing off of the grill. Just let it sit on the pan. Just let it slowly come up. Put it back on the grill if you need, but you can even just take a break, take it off the grill so you can go really, really slow during that cooking stage. Here's another one of the tips I tell all my people. Don't ever use cooking spray on your grill. Don't ever use a towel or a paper towel and spray down your grill. Just get a little bowl of vegetable oil, get an onion, dip the onion in there. This is the best way to oil down your cooking grate. You don't want to, cooking spray doesn't do anything really for your grate. towels and paper towels will leave little bits of stuff behind you don't want. But the onion applies the oil, and if anything gets stuck behind, it's just a little bit of savory flavor. Works really, really well. We're going to oil down that cooking grate. We're going to wait until any of these yellow flames die down.
Well, hi, hello. I'll be grilling the salad, so I'm going to do the same thing to my grill.
So there are a few exceptions, but in general, yellow fire tastes bad. So if you have a lot of yellow fire coming up from oil or from something else on your grill, or if your charcoal is and your wood is still so hot and its initial burn that's creating a lot of yellow fire, wait for that to die down. Wait until you just have glowing red coals or some blue fire, that sort of thing. Yellow fire, in almost all cases, doesn't taste good. So we're going to wait for that yellow fire to go away, which it has. It only takes a few seconds. We're going to drop these steaks right on this hot fire. This fire is crazy hot. And you'll create a little yellow fire here as the fat from the steak renders out. And that is just something you have to live with. But that will die down in a few minutes as well. Yeah, that is roaring hot. And again, there's no such thing as a grill that's too hot. You cannot go too hot. And one of the things, you kind of have to be you have to practice, you have to get a feel for it. With as hot as this grill is, just watching this go, what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to sear the bottom side. And again, to not let it get going too fast on me, I'm going to pull those off of the grill and just set them back on the pan before I grill the other side. Because it will be too hot to just do both sides at the same time. And again, the bigger the steak, the more you want to slow down your cook, especially if you have a prime or a Wagyu. You have plenty of fat to keep it basting and marbled juicy the whole time. There's no need to rush your cook. You want to go slow enough so it doesn't run away on you. I'm just going to move these a little bit. The middle ones to the outside ones to the middle. But I'm not going to move them around very much. I'm not going to flip them over back and forth and back and forth. I'm not going to twist them around. One of the things I think, when you have a lot of practice with the grill, you realize a lot of being a great cook on the grill is just standing back and letting the grill do its thing. So you don't need to be meshing with the food all the time. You don't need to be playing with it. Just let it do its thing. Let it work. But those have been on maybe 60 seconds, 90 seconds. Oh, those are so beautiful. You can see how quick that was. Those were not even on there, I think, a minute and a half. And we already have a beautiful crust and a beautiful sear on those. But the fire is so hot, I'm not just going to flip it over in place. I'm going to let the temperature that's already hit those steaks take some time to even out through the whole thing. One of the things we're going for is we don't want to have well done on the edges and then medium and medium rare in the middle. We want to have a crust as nice as we can on the edges and as much as possible of the interior of the steak at a very warm, very high medium rare. And I know just since we've got time, since we're cooking and we're on camera, I will say I know there's people who think they want their steak rare and there's people who think they want their steak well done. But to put it bluntly, you're probably wrong. And I'll explain what I mean. If you query people,
and those of us who know Ryan, and he's not afraid to say that about anything you make. So,
but it's not just my opinion versus your opinion. And this is why. If you ask a random group of hundreds of people, how do you like your steak done? You'll see a bell curve, and some people will say rare, medium rare. It'll peak over medium. You'll see some people say medium well and well done. But if you blindfold people and you give them samples of different steaks, two things happen. The bell curve totally swells. The eggs, people are way more similar than they like to think. It all comes together, and it moves from medium to medium rare.
yeah.
Everyone really likes medium rare, even if they don't think they do, even if they don't know they do. If they eat it blindfold, they're like, my gosh, that's the best one. That's the one where it's not raw, it's not cold, it's not tough, it's not chewy, but all of the flavors are still there. We haven't dried it out, it's still juicy. Now I will say, medium rare for me is a range from anything from 130 to 139 is medium rare. And for a long time, if you hit that window, you were good. But with modern cooking techniques and the more practice you get, you may decide that for some cuts, you want to go on the colder end of the spectrum. For other cuts, you want to go on the higher end of that spectrum. So like when we cook a ribeye, we're in the low to mid 130s. But when we cook a skirt steak or a flank steak, for example, we're going to be in the high 130s, maybe even 140 or 141, depending on what we do. So, like I said, 140 is technically in the medium, but there's a range there you can go with.
While he stopped talking for just a minute. So while you're doing this, because he has a partner that also grills, I'm going to be doing tonight's salad. And I'm doing a grilled escarole salad. That is so simple, you can do this, anyone could do this without a recipe. This was simply 2 heads of escarole that I trimmed, left a little bit of the root on so that it hangs together. Cut it into 4 pieces in each head. Now all I'm going to do with this, to get it ready for the grill, is simply to drizzle it with a little olive oil. That's it, just a little olive oil to get it ready for the grill. And that's basically starting your dressing for this salad. And of course I'm using an extra virgin olive oil, and it doesn't have a very high flash point. So it will burn quickly, which is okay because I don't mind it. This is going to be a little charred. But you can't cook for a long time or it's going to begin to smoke on this. So I'm going to take this over. I'm just going to put that oiled side right down on the grill, and we'll let you watch Ryan for just a second, and I'll show you what this looks like when I'm done.
So I put the steaks back on the grill to sear the other side now. The fire has settled down a little bit. I temped all the steaks. They were in about 75 to 80 degrees, which is actually a little cooler than what I anticipated given how hot that grill was. But that's a good thing to be under what I was anticipating, because you can always add a little bit more and a little bit more in terms of temperature back into your grilled steaks or your grilled food. Once it's there, you can't take it back out. There may be some exceptions to that if you rest for a very extended period of time and you're very careful when you carve your meat. You can sometimes, rescue a meat that maybe went 2 to 5 degrees over what you wanted. But in general, always go slow, ease up on it, and if you're under, that's good news because you just go a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more.
30 to 40 seconds per side, so not very long. This is not something you put on the grill and then go in the house to check something else. No. You have to stay right here for this. And when it's looking grilled, something about like that, then you can begin to take these off. Escarole has a almost kind of bitter taste to it, but it tames it when you grill it. That smokiness kind of just tames down just a little bit, and it makes the perfect accompaniment to a grilled dinner. And it wilts it just a little bit, so we're kind of looking for that little bit of char, a little bit of wilt on these greens. Now, there aren't very many vegetables that you can do on the grill that are as easy as this. And oftentimes people don't think about grilling lettuce. What? Grilled lettuce? But wait till you taste this. It's pretty phenomenal. Now, I don't use my gas grill for very much. We pretty much are really food snobs, and we use pretty much only charcoal when we're cooking. But something like this, when all the other grills are occupied, I don't mind jumping on this grill and doing that. So the next step across this, and I want you to know my hands are impeccably clean. As Julia Child would say, take this impeccably clean spoon, and now we're going to sprinkle it across like this. She's my favorite. She was my mentor. And this is simply feta cheese. Now, don't, listen to what I'm saying, don't buy already crumbled feta. It takes like 30 seconds to crumble this feta, and it is such a much better product than the already crumbled stuff. Because if you look at the expiration date, like the expiration date on this was January. January for crumbles. How fresh and delightful are those going to taste? But if you buy it in a whole and just crumble it yourself, you get a lot fresher, a lot nicer. These are walnuts. Now you certainly can toast them ahead of time like I do because it makes the flavor burst, or you can just serve them, you know, raw walnuts. And I'm just going to sprinkle those across the top. And the reason you don't have a recipe for this is because this absolutely takes no recipe. You don't need to measure out any ingredients. The final step, to add a little sweetness now, is to drizzle it with a little bit of honey. And I love to use, of course, the honey sticks because you can really get a nice drizzle and control it a lot more than if you were just trying to pour it out of the jar. Yum, 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 yum. Check it out. Escarole, wilted, with feta, honey, and walnuts.
That looks good.
Pretty good, huh?
So now we've kind of completed stage one of our cook. We've got both sides of the steak nicely seared. We seared them crazy hot. They were on the grill maybe less than 2 minutes, would be my guess. I wasn't timing it. They got nice and beautiful crusted sear. Don't always be looking for grill marks is another thing I have to tell some, chefs that I'm training. Grill marks are beautiful, and you see that in all the TV commercials with the hamburger frame rolled. But really, grill marks to me are a sign that the metal is hot, but the fire isn't. So the metal has stored up a bunch of energy, but the fire is not quite up. When you have no grill marks, it meant that the fire and the air between the grates was just as hot as the grate itself. And so if you have a crust across the whole top of your steak, I think that's better than having grill stripes down it. So again, that's a sign that your fire is roaring hot. That's a good sign. But now we've moved into stage two, and we're just cooking these steaks. I tempt them after the second sear of the other side, and they ranged. 3 of them were about 87 degrees, but 1 of them was 100 degrees. So I'm going to keep an eye on that one. I'm going to watch it. I want to have them all arrive at the end point at the same time. But now I put them on the far side of the grill. There's no fire directly under these steaks. They're just feeling the radiant heat slowly coming off of the fire that's on the far side. And they're just going to come up slowly to temperature. One other thing I'll mention, when I'm cooking beef, especially when I've got special beef. So this is 28-day dry-aged Wagyu New York strip. This is a very special beef. I'm really excited to eat this tonight. I will often introduce very, very little or zero salt as I am rubbing it and seasoning it in advance. So these got rubbed with a little bit of butter and garlic early in the day. They sat out in the open air in the fridge all day. I have a cocoa chili powder dry rub that has a tiny bit of salt in it, but not very much. And the reason I do that is I don't want the salt to dry out any extra moisture from these dry aged steaks. They're already dry enough. And I don't want the salt to break down any of the proteins too early. But when we go to slice these, they are going to need some salt then to eat and be just perfect. And so we may introduce like a little melted butter, a salted butter, a little finishing salt sprinkled over the top. And one of the things I love about finishing a steak with salt as opposed to seasoning it with salt earlier on is then you're able to control it and everyone can do their own. But then also as you eat it, rather than just having beef that tastes salty, you kind of have this like cycle of waves in your palate where you taste a lot of the beef and then you get a big salt flake and it comes up and you taste like this rush of salt and then the beef and then the cocoa dry rub. And it's kind of like this cycle. It is supposed to just being this monotone thing where it's kind of hard to distinguish the layers. And so when your salt is peaking and valleying as you eat, that's a really, really fun experience, especially with your center of the plate item, like a beautiful steak. One of the other things I'll mention is now that I'm looking at these steaks on the grill, there's some brown sugar in that dry rub. And some of these steaks were so hot in just a hot zone of that fire that the sugar caramelized and the proteins of the beef seared and browned and caramelized. So that's the sear we want. But on some of them, in a few spots, like this stretch right here, this stretch right here, the sugar caramelized, but the sugar caramelized maybe slow enough that the proteins of the beef itself didn't quite sear as much as I want. That's okay. Again, since I'm slowly approaching my target, I'm just gonna see. This steak here, I'm not gonna give it anything else. It's already got all the sear I want. This one here and this one here, I may put back on the fire just to finish browning that protein.
While Ryan's finishing those steaks, I'm going to tell you what I did for my side dish for vegetable tonight. I did a fresh cream corn, and this is the time of year when all I can do is think about my mom. I'm from Iowa, and when it was strawberry season, we had strawberries morning, noon, and night. When it was apple season, you had apples morning, noon, and night. And when it was corn season, which it always was in Iowa, we had corn morning, noon, and night. Because that's how we learned to eat, off the land and in season. So tonight, I took the corn off the cob, so I have fresh corn. And that you can do ahead of time. Just before serving, I heated up fresh cream. Put the fresh corn into the cream. You don't need to cook it ahead of time. You don't need to steam it or anything. Just put it right into the cream and let it boil just a little bit. Add a couple cubes of butter, some salt and pepper, and voila, that's fresh creamed corn. You don't have to make any silly white sauce. You don't have to do anything crazy like this. This is just cream, butter, salt, and pepper. Bang. Delish. My mom wishes she had this recipe. It's one I've improved on hers. So tonight, we may not be able to show you this for dessert, but we decided to do our final course with dessert as on the grill. We just took those peaches, cut them in half, and took the pits out, and we're going to grill them on the grill, drizzle them with some melted butter, serve them over a really nice quality homemade ice cream or gelato, and that's it. So simple, no big preparation. Really, all of this meal, I mean, yes, it took us an arm and a leg time because we were doing it in steps with all these little mise en place trays, but for you, a grilling night can all be done with your guests. And you can involve them. You can say, honey, please come grill those romaine. Oh, honey, please come grill these peaches. Everyone loves to jump on the grill. Everyone loves to think that they are the grill master. And you get to participate as you go along. The one thing that took a little longer was that Ryan did make our homemade bread for tonight. I went to Harmon's to buy a loaf because I didn't have time, and he showed up with these homemade breads, and I went, that's my son. How are you ready?
We're coming along great. So one of my steaks is already temping at like 125. The other ones are all in the 105 range. So this one just got a little warm up. So I'm going to let that one just, again, take a break. Don't rush it. You don't even, and I'm going to let these ones come up to the grill. Let's look at peek at that trout. Oh, it's amazing how beautiful. I put some honey on it. I spread these oranges out in there. Sometimes you can put these oranges directly on top of your fish if you want. I know we have a guest tonight who's sensitive to acid, and so I'm going to leave them on the side. But very, very simple. When you smoke an orange slice, it's one of my favorite treats. Whether it's on the fish or it's on the side, it'll candy up. The sugars will caramelize. The bitter oranges and the bitter oils in the peel will kind of mellow out. You can eat those smoked oranges, rind and all. Just delicious. Really one of my favorite things.
I think we found that one of our favorite salads to use really is you put anything on the grill. For example, you have just slices of watermelon. You can drizzle those with a little oil, put them right on the grill, get your grill marks on that, take that off, take the same feta cheese, sprinkle it on top with a little mint, grilled watermelon salad. Absolutely wonderful for this time of year and so refreshing. Everybody knows they can grill vegetables, but grilling fruit always takes your guests by surprise. Like, what did you do in there with that grilled watermelon? I'm telling you, it's such a fun thing. Sometimes we'll put even fresh grapes on a pan with holes in it, put that in the smoker and let those fresh grapes smoke in there. Then you might toss a salad, throw those smoked grapes in there, and just watch. Stand back and watch your guests as they go, what is that? And I'm like, so it's always that little surprise, that little bit of what is that kind of a thing, like grilling lettuce. I like to use the Escarole because it's a little bit more firm than what a romaine is, and people are a little shy because it has that little bit of tanginess to it, but not when it's grilled and charred. I know that we're doing this tonight for Volunteers of America. And these kind of service philanthropic organizations are near and dear to my heart. I've worked in so many of them across my career, and it was always wonderful when we could step up and serve them. This particular organization I'm so impressed with. But right now, as you well know, all philanthropic organizations are kind of in trouble because people have stopped giving. There's that sense of scarcity. I gotta hold on to what I have because I'm afraid I'm not gonna have any more. That mindset is creating more scarcity. And if we worry and think about taking care of those who are the most vulnerable among us, I can tell you right now that we will be taken care of. If we ignore them and hold it tight, I want you to think about this. If you hold your money this tight, get it in there, pile it down. How ready are you to receive the blessings that are ready for you? But if you're like this, with your arms outstretched and your abundance flowing out, how ready are you to receive it back in return? This? Are you this? This creates the natural flow of the universe, and I invite you to be part of that. Last year, Volunteers of America put in 3,000 volunteer hours on things across this state. That's a tremendous amount. The other thing that they're doing right now is providing services for our mental health cases that are, once again, in the most vulnerable among us. Those people had vulnerable situations before. Now, can you imagine? Can you imagine living in that situation, not even knowing if your homeless shelter is going to be open? Not knowing what your next move is? So, I see the easiest way for us to move out of the situation that we're in is for us personally and individually to move out. To move out one at a time. And that's what you can do tonight. Tonight you can donate something. If it's a small amount or a medium amount or a big amount, it doesn't matter. Just think of every single one of you watching just donated $10. What would be great? Just think if every single one of you watching could donate $100. What we would make for the night and what difference we would make. Those of you who are able, what if you gave 1,000? What if you gave 5,000? I was willing to step forward and put on this entire event tonight as part of my donation to Volunteers of America. I put my money where my mouth is, and let me tell you, that ain't always easy. And so I ask you to step forward, to think about creating this cycle of abundance for you, for our vulnerable population, and really for our globe. Thank you.
So I've been temping these steaks. They're now in the high 120s, which is about where I'm going to take them off the grill. Even though I want to serve them in the 130s, I know that if I take it off of the fire and off of the heat in the high 120s, and I cover it up with foil, it's going to continue to get a little bit of rise, maybe 10 degrees out of that. And while I let it sit like that, I'm also going to, this is one of the most important stages whenever you're cooking a whole muscle meat. So any whole muscle, whether you've got a whole turkey or just a single chicken breast, whether you've got a leg of lamb or just a single New York strip steak, if it's a whole muscle, not ground meat, you want to let it rest. And a couple of things will happen as the meat rests. During the cooking process, a lot of the meat's proteins tend to constrict and bind up, and they squeeze out a lot of their own fat and juices. But when we let the meat rest, that process partially reverses. And so those meat cells in the muscle fibers will reabsorb a lot of those liquids and juices. So sometimes I have been at places and you slice into a steak and blood, or really it's just water, but it's red, runs all over the plate. And then you think like, oh, this is so underdone, it's so rare. Probably it could be overdone, it could be seeing that blood run all over your plate is not a sign of being over or underdone. It's not a sign of rareness or well-doneness. It's a sign the steak hasn't rested long enough. We're slicing it in too early, and all of those juices that are kind of like got squeezed out of the cells and now we're just trapped in between them have not had a chance to go back into the cells again. You let those rest and those juices go back into the cells. That way when you slice it open, you'll have a beautiful pink piece of meat, and very little liquid will run out over your plate or your board. So that's kind of what you're going for when you want to rest a little piece of meat. So I've covered these in foil. I'm just going to let them sit here on that grill, which is still warm, but I don't even think I'm going to close it down. And so I want to make sure they don't go cold, but I don't want to let it go too hot. And we'll let those rest for at least 5 to 10 minutes. But as long as they stay warm, they could rest for 15 or 20. So while we eat the trout, we'll let the steak rest, and then it'll be perfect once we're done eating the trout.
Okay, so you have the recipe for this ahead of time. This is my truffle compound butter. I soften the butter, I put a little truffle oil in it and a little black pepper, and just stir it together, then roll it and put it in a piece of parchment, which is what this piece is. I cut these off of, put it in the fridge. Now I've sliced it, and on each of those steaks I'm going to put a couple of these pats of butter and just let it melt into that steak. So in addition to that, I have my treasure chest. And when you have 30-year-old aged balsamic vinegar that is more expensive than about anything on the planet, it comes in its own treasure chest. And you use it only on special occasions. So this is straight from Italy, and we're going to drizzle a little bit of that across each of these steaks tonight, across the top of that. When you have real aged vinegar, balsamic, it's like syrup. It comes out thick and syrupy. Not something you wouldn't ever want to put this in salad dressing. That would be a waste. But drizzled in the right spot, like over strawberries and ice cream. Yum, yum, yum. And then a little bit of sea salt. The kind of sea salt you use here is critical. I love this Maldon sea salt because it's very flakes. And you can see those actual flakes. See if you can see this. I'm going to try and get close enough. But can you see how flaky that salt is? And so this is one of the world's really premium salts. And because of those big flakes, when you get one of those in your mouth, it's like bang, bang, bang. So I'm going to put a little of that on your steak tonight. All right, how are we coming?
Coming good.
Oh, look at the peaches.
So for dessert, we're going to grill peaches. Just as Mary was talking about before, when it's peach season, you got to eat peaches. And so we had peaches on my salad last night. We did Greek peaches for dessert at my house 2 nights ago. We're going to do them again because it's peach season. The peaches are delicious. We should just eat the hell out of them. So what I've done is I've put these peaches in half. I've taken the pit out, put a little pat of butter on the top of each one. And I'll let you get a picture there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this with a lid. And that's going to circulate the heat like an oven. It's going to melt that butter over the top of the peach, let the peach soften up. Then I'm going to flip the peaches over to that hot zone of the fire and brown the cut surface. Then we'll let them cool down to room temperature and eat them with ice cream. And peaches and cream, isn't it? Can't go wrong.
This was left over from my watermelon mojito. So I'm just going to use a little bit of this to put on the ice cream and peaches. As you're coming along, you just have to kind of think about what I have and what's available that you can use. Even on my escarole salad, I could have put, even on my charcuterie, I could have put a little mint or some fresh basil. If you don't have exactly what the recipe calls for, then just like be a little creative. In fact, you can even Google it. You say, what can I substitute for basil? What can I substitute for oregano? What can I substitute for mint? Now there aren't a lot of things you can substitute for mint, but believe it or not, cilantro is one of them in the right recipe. I always say that the way you get to be a good cook is not to be a fearful cook. You need to be a cook of courage and not be afraid to try things. Okay, I think we're ready to sit down and have our first course with our trout. Let's everyone be seated. One of the great things about entertaining friends is you can bring friends together that don't even know each other, and food is the great denominator. So I decided I was going to set this table in pinks and greens tonight, and this morning my dear friend Katie and Rob called and said, what colors are you using? Because we're bringing flowers, brown floral for your table. And I went, thank you. And everyone just kind of joins in. I told Keith and Cam to bring your cameras. Everyone everyone joins in. Jen showed up early with her husband to help with everything that I had. I love a gopher person. Go for this, go for that, go for this. And this is, I think, such a beautiful presentation. The wine for our first course tonight is a rosé, but Ryan, I don't know much about it.
So this is from Conundrum in Napa Valley. This is a sparkling rosé. It's going to be very typical of a dry brut rosé. So you're going to get a lot of berry and on the nose and some fruit. When it hits the palate, you're going to get a lot of melon. It's very, very melony. Really, it's really kind of fun. But it's got some minerality backing it up. Very long, crisp, citrusy finish, so it'll go really, really well, both as a standalone aperitif before the meal, but I love to pair it with food. It's dry enough that it goes really well, especially with something that has some of these smoky flavors like this fish.
I love this rosé.
This is a new one that just recently started bringing into Utah.
But the grape varietals are there.
Where's this from?
No, Conundrum is the name of the one. No, I didn't. But I cut back on the first one so we could really blow it out on the next two.
I said, don't spend exactly. Then when I looked, I said, you know what, honey? I said, should I take these back and for these friends? This is, all right, we put the butter right on this steak, along with drizzling it with the balsamic and then the sprinkling it with the sea salt. We're serving this down with our beautiful creamed corn. And I had to serve this in my grandmother's serving dish because this reminds me so much of home. And then of course following this, which you won't get to stay here for, we have the peaches and ice cream. This is the wine that Ryan chose. I'm going to have him tell you a little bit about this Cabernet.
So my favorite wine is big, bold, full-bodied Cabernets from Napa Valley. Those are my favorites in general. I like all wine, and so for this one we went with a very famous winery, Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, which is the winery that in 1976, won the Judgment of Paris, and famously alongside Chateau Montelena won the best Bordeaux blend and the best Chardonnay, really kind of vindicating American wine producers as being world class. Blind tasting blew everyone away. This is that same winery. This is their 2015. I wasn't sure if it was going to be ready to open, but I just thought we'd go ahead and do it. And on the nose, oh my gosh, that's so buttery, so ready. A lot of berry. I'm sure when it hits the palate, you're going to get a lot of earthiness and leatherness, but it should have a long, rich, full, oaky finish. It'll be perfect to stand up against this very rich meat. This is kind of like what I live to eat. I try and eat less of it the older I get, but like dry aged beef and big California Cabernet.
Yeah, pace yourself. I want to toast to my son and to all my friends. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mary and Ryan. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Now, I'm sure if you've been drinking along with us, you're ready to donate. So, cheers to donations. Seriously, you know how this is so close to my heart. And I know because you're here tonight watching this, it's also close to yours. Thanks for being in my home with us.
Cheers.
I was shown a lot of compassion from Volunteers of America, Utah in the beginning of my recovery. And I feel like at Detox, we give that compassion as well. We give that to our clients. I was a teacher at Granger High School, and I was using cocaine a lot and trying to hold it together there. I resigned my position. I had a legal defender who suggested that I try Volunteers of America day treatment. I was in treatment for 3 months, and I got sober, and I've been sober ever since.
The work that we do here, I could do for the rest of my life because it is that impactful. And I wish that when I was a youth, when I was struggling with some of the things that our clients do on a day-to-day basis, I wish someone was there for me like the staff is for our clients.
We try to help people stabilize and figure out how can we help them function on a daily basis in a more stable way. So they might need a medication for a mental health issue. They might need detoxification for an addiction. And that detox, we run 2 centers, is often the path that starts people toward recovery and living in recovery.
There really isn't, I don't think, a family out there that hasn't been touched with addiction. And homelessness can be a direct result of addiction and substance use. We have so many young people with the opioid addiction. They're getting into an addiction and ending up homeless because it takes over their lives. They're powerless to stop using on their own.
People come to us because there's something that's not working in their world, and they're not quite sure how to get out of it on their own. They need a little support to figure that out. And so they come to us because they believe that we might be able to help them, and we hope the same thing. We hope that together we can find a way to help things work a little bit better.
A lot of our clients have experienced trauma. A lot of our clients are self-medicating because of mental health issues that have gone untreated.
We see people often using substances as a way to cope, as a way to adapt, looking for ways to survive, which is what people do when they've experienced trauma. They're looking for survival. We try to take universal precautions. We try to say trauma is so prevalent that we're going to assume that the people who are coming through our front door have experienced some kind of trauma, and we're going to try to respond accordingly, which means we're going to try to create an environment that promotes safety, that promotes trust, feeling of collaboration and mutuality, allowing people to feel like they have a part in their treatment. Sometimes what people need is a safe place where they can stabilize, where they can breathe a little bit.
I think one of the reasons I chose to volunteer with the VOA is that there is a ton of different areas that you can plug yourself in. You can come by yourself, you can come with a group, and you can make an impact immediately in someone's day.
People really heal through connection, and finding those places where we can connect with one another and where we can support and facilitate connections with the people around us, that's a place where healing is going to happen.